My father had been gone less than a week, and right at the memorial, my stepmother coldly pulled out a supplemental will, declaring the entire cabin in Aspen Valley would belong to my half-sister. I froze among relatives, hearing the house tied to my childhood and my mother's memory stripped away by just a few sheets of paper. Victoria Hale, the woman I had called stepmother for 20 years, flashed a sharp, icy smile. Beside her, Sabrina, my supposedly fragile younger sister, shot me a triumphant glance. I knew my father had never changed his mind. He promised the cabin was mine, the only place that kept me close to him. Yet in front of everyone, I was turned into an outsider, with no one stepping in to defend me. That humiliation cut like a knife, not only stealing the house but shredding my dignity. And what suffocated me even more, they weren't stopping there. They would build even dirtier tricks to erase me completely from the family and from the life my father left behind. I had no idea that battle would turn me into someone chasing justice in a revenge story no one saw coming. And in truth, this was only the beginning. I was born and raised in Maplewood, a quiet little town in Colorado, where winters blanket everything in white snow and summers glow with endless green mountain ranges. Since childhood, I was used to the sound of the wind chime hanging on my father's porch. Its soft jingling every time the mountain breeze blew through made me feel safe. I, Olivia Carter, never imagined life would throw me into a whirlwind of betrayal as cruel as what came later. My nature was gentle, patient, always smiling. Colleagues at Maplewood Elementary often called me the teacher of peace, because I kept a calm voice even in the noisiest classroom. Children loved me because I could turn dry math problems into games, encourage every shy kid to stand up and read aloud. I never asked for more than the simple things: a safe home, my beloved students, and a real family. My father, Thomas Carter, was a carpenter who spent his life working with wood and mountains. He built the cabin in Aspen Valley with his own 2 hands when he was young. Every summer he took me there, teaching me how to start a fire with dry pine wood, how to tell deer tracks from elk tracks, and how to listen to the forest like listening to a friend. That cabin was more than a weekend retreat. It was my childhood memory, the only place where I saw him smile without worry after my mother died young. I once told him, "Dad, I want to keep this cabin forever, even when I have children of my own." He only patted my head and said, "This home will always be yours, Olivia. I'll make sure of it. No one can ever take it away." That was why he had written a will many years ago. In it, the Aspen Valley cabin was assigned to me. Colorado law is clear. A will is only valid if notarized properly, with 2 independent witnesses, and the signer must be deemed competent at the time of signing. In addition, he created a conditional power of attorney, effective only if 2 of his personal doctors confirmed he had lost capacity. This was the crucial detail, the legal safeguard that seemed small but later became the only weapon I could cling to. My father was meticulous. He kept a dark brown leather journal, recording dates and everything he did. His habit was to note down everything, fixing a door hinge, building another bookshelf, the day he took me to the park. That journal usually sat on the highest shelf in the cabin, next to the old oil lamp he always used. To me, it was proof of a lifetime of honesty and care. After my father remarried Victoria, everything changed. She dressed expensively, often showing up at social events in Denver, but at home she was cold, always looking at me with disdain. My half-sister Sabrina was 4 years younger than me, smart, studying law, and from childhood she had learned to mimic her mother, to win my father's favor. As a little girl, she smiled sweetly at me in front of him, but whenever he turned away she whispered cutting remarks. "You're just clinging to the past. One day you'll have nothing." I brushed it off, thinking it was childish talk. I didn't know it was a cruel prophecy. At work, I always carried my old green satchel, the gift my father gave me when I graduated college. On the handle, he carved a small line of wood. For Olivia, to carry knowledge and courage. Whenever I felt tired, I laid my hand over those words as a reminder to stay strong. My marriage with David was peaceful at first. He was a construction engineer, serious and responsible, but sometimes too practical. He believed in quick solutions, avoided confrontation. I loved that calmness, but I also feared that if one day I needed him to fight beside me, would he dare? "Olivia, I just want you to live comfortably. David once said when he saw me arguing with Victoria. "We can buy another house. We don't have to cling to that cabin." I went silent, unable to explain that the cabin wasn't just a house, it was the final promise between my father and me. As time passed, Victoria tightened her control. She often hinted the cabin should be sold for investment. I refused, and my father still stood by me. He even wrote in his journal, "The cabin belongs to Olivia. No one is allowed to touch it." Evidence, diary, July 12, 2018, clearly notes cabin is property left to Olivia. Then early-stage Alzheimer's began to creep into my father's life. Even when he forgot things, he still wrote in his journal, the handwriting shaky. I didn't realize the illness would become a weapon for others to exploit. One late autumn evening, I accidentally overheard Sabrina whispering to her mother in the kitchen, "If we have the papers, who could ever prove anything?" Victoria smirked, glancing toward my father's room. I stood behind the door, my heart pounding. I almost walked in but held back, thinking I might have misheard. I had no idea that was the beginning of a carefully prepared forgery plan, and that everything my father had written in his journal, every legal safeguard he had built so carefully, was about to be twisted beyond recognition. And right at the memorial, that abnormal truth would be revealed. That day, the church in downtown Maplewood glowed under the cold sunlight of winter. I stood in the front row, clutching a black scarf, eyes fixed on my father's portrait. On the wooden table, his photo smiled gently, as if he were still there. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay composed for his final farewell. After the prayers, silence spread across the room. I believed everything would end here, that I would have time to mourn him and then return to the Aspen Valley cabin to begin preserving the legacy he left me. But I was wrong. The sound of Victoria's heels echoed sharply against the tile, cold and arrogant. She walked toward the podium, holding a neat stack of documents, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "I have something to announce," she said firmly, her voice carrying so much weight the entire room fell silent. I frowned. What could possibly be so important at a memorial service? "This is the supplemental will of Thomas Carter," Victoria declared, raising the papers high. "It was executed 2 years ago, fully notarized. According to it, all real estate assets, including the Aspen Valley cabin, will be transferred to Sabrina Hale." The air shattered. Relatives murmured, others cast pitying looks my way. I stood frozen, ears ringing, the ground beneath me splitting open. "No way," I whispered. Sabrina stepped forward, a faint smile on her lips. "Sister Olivia, Father trusted me. He knew my legal knowledge would manage the property better." She turned to the crowd. "He wanted the cabin turned into a resort project. This is a huge opportunity. The cabin was my father's lifeblood, the place he promised again and again he'd leave to me." I couldn't hold it in, my voice trembling in the silent church. "This is a forgery. Father never changed his will." Victoria spun toward me, her icy eyes locking on mine. "Olivia, you're grieving, but these are legal documents. If you don't believe me, see for yourself." She opened the file, passing it to a few relatives. One uncle glanced quickly, nodding reluctantly. "It has a notary seal. The signature looks real." My throat burned. I remembered every shaky stroke of my father's handwriting, every time he swore the cabin was mine. Yet now, before everyone, I was painted as a delusional woman clinging to the past. David gripped my hand, whispering, "Olivia, stay calm, we'll figure this out later." But his hand was icy, uncertain. Suddenly my phone buzzed inside my coat pocket. A text message appeared from an unknown sender. Its short words sliced like a blade. "Evidence. Email forward, November 3rd, 2021, 2:27 p.m. Use the signature sample from the 2019 refinance file. Make sure Olivia never finds out." My mouth dropped open. Could it be Sabrina? I turned to look at my half-sister, catching the victorious smirk still lingering at her lips. My chest threatened to explode. You planned this all along," I shouted, but my voice echoed into a room full of doubt. Some looked at me with pity, others with irritation, as if I were just causing a scene. Victoria raised her hand, her tone cutting. "Enough, Olivia. This isn't the time for fantasies. Everyone here sees the documents. If you want to challenge them, go to court. But right now, respect your father's memory." The words struck like a slap. My eyes blurred with tears. How could they? At the very memorial, with my father's ashes barely cold, they pressed down on me. staging a play to strip away everything. I searched the room for a sympathetic glance but only found cold silence. Even David, the husband I thought would shield me, lowered his head to avoid my gaze. My heart cracked. I felt betrayed from all sides. But in that haze, I realized I had just received the first piece of evidence, the email, a fracture in their flawless facade. I clenched my phone, a vow forming silently in my mind. I would prove the truth. I would not let my father's name be defiled or the cabin fall into greedy hands. But before I could even catch my breath, Victoria turned to Attorney Randall Pierce and gave a subtle nod. He opened his briefcase, pulling out another file, twice as thick as the last. The entire room turned to watch. I didn't yet know what it contained, but my instincts screamed it was far worse. I only knew one thing. But worse was coming. After the memorial, I came home with eyes burning from tears. The Aspen Valley cabin should have been the place to heal, the anchor of memory, but now it felt like a battlefield I was never prepared for. I told myself that anonymous email was the key clue, the first crack to expose Victoria and Sabrina. But before I could even form a plan, a wave of events crashed down on me, one after another, dragging me under like icy current. On Monday morning, I was revising lesson plans in my study when a hard knock rattled the door. The mailman handed me a thick envelope stamped with a bold red seal. Inside was a notice from Attorney Randall Pierce's office, representing the legal heir, demanding I vacate the Aspen Valley cabin within 30 days. My hands shook as I read the cold line. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal enforcement. I called David right away, my voice breaking. "Do you see this? They want me out of the cabin like I'm some squatter," he sighed. "Olivia, I know this hurts, but if they have legal papers, it's tough to fight. Maybe we should think about buying another place." I reeled. "You're telling me to give up? That cabin is my father's entire legacy. I can't." Isolation tightened its grip as even the one person I trusted faltered. I stood on the porch, staring at the bare winter trees, feeling like a shadow fighting a machine much larger than me. Inside, my heart screamed. But outside there was only the mocking chime of the old wind bells that once comforted me. Days later at Maplewood Elementary, I walked into class to whispers from parents and sidelong glances. A colleague pulled me aside and murmured, "Olivia, there's a rumor going around. They're saying you abandoned your father when he was sick, left him alone in the cabin." I gasped. Who would say that?" She lowered her eyes. "Word is it came from Sabrina. She mentioned it at a Denver Bar Association event. Rumors spread fast." The rest of the day, I couldn't focus on teaching. Watching children laugh and play, I felt cut off from their world. Back home, I opened my laptop and saw an anonymous post on the community forum. Thomas Carter's daughter abandoned him during his illness. Now she's after his estate. Dozens of comments piled below, half believing, half skeptical. Evidence: social media screenshot, January 8th, 2022, 9:14 a.m. Anonymous post accusing Olivia of neglecting her father while ill. I tried calling Sabrina, praying she'd stop this smear campaign. She answered with a mocking laugh. "You'd better get used to it, Olivia. People believe what's on paper, not your pathetic sobs." My hands shook as I hung up, shame washing over me. I had never felt more cornered. That weekend, David and I sat in the living room, firelight flickering against the walls. I poured out everything, the anonymous email, the rumors, my growing fear, hoping he'd be the one anchor left. But he looked down, voice heavy. "Olivia, I think you're torturing yourself. Maybe your father, maybe he really did change his mind. His illness could have pushed him to leave things with someone capable. Sabrina's a lawyer. Maybe he thought it made sense." I froze. "You're siding with them?" David shook his head. "I'm not taking sides. I just want you to accept reality so you can move forward." Tears spilled as the world cracked again. Even my husband didn't believe me. Or worse, didn't dare. Alone in the cold house, I clutched the green satchel carved with my father's words, wondering how I could fight this web of lies when even those closest to me were slipping away. 3 blows in a row stripped me of support and painted me as a villain to the community. I was the ungrateful daughter, the gold digger clinging to property, the teacher losing control. I was being forced out of the cabin, smeared online, and even David began to retreat. I had the anonymous email and a handful of my father's memories, But how could scraps stand against the legal and financial machine Victoria and Sabrina commanded? Each night I opened my father's journal, searching for peace in his familiar handwriting. But the shaky words, "The cabin belongs to Olivia. No one may touch it," only stabbed deeper. In the dark, I whispered, "Dad, what should I do?" One gray afternoon, leaving school, I saw a sleek black car parked at the gate. Victoria stepped out in a fur coat, her face smug. Sabrina stood beside her, holding a new stack of papers. They no longer hid behind lawyers. Victoria strode straight toward me, eyes gleaming with challenge. "Olivia," she said clearly, "it's time you know this isn't just about the cabin. We have a much bigger plan." I stumbled back, heart pounding. I didn't yet know what she meant, but my gut told me they were about to go too far, about to overreach in a way that could destroy my life completely. The day I uncovered the real scheme, snow fell thick and white, swallowing Maplewood in silence. I had just stepped out of my classroom when a strange packet appeared in my mailbox. The courier left no name, only dropped it and vanished. I brought it inside, opened it, and felt my heart plunge into darkness. Inside was a detailed project plan for something called Aspen Valley Lodge and Resort. The developer behind it, Blue Mesa Development, one of Colorado's biggest real estate companies. Right on the cover, bold letters stood out, "Legal Coordinator, Sabrina Hale." Flipping through page after page, I found site maps, detailed blueprints, projected start dates. Everything confirmed my father's cabin and the forest surrounding it had been marked as a luxury tourist hub. The cabin was nothing but a pawn in a multi-million-dollar deal. Victoria needed money to cover debts, Sabrina needed a career-making case, and Randall Pierce, the crooked attorney, was the man making it all legally airtight. My chest tightened. My father once said the cabin was his heart, and now they plotted to sell that heart for their own gain. I decided to go to Denver to dig deeper. The notary office where the supplemental will was supposedly signed was small, tucked into an aging building. I stepped inside, requesting the file. The receptionist looked uneasy, but eventually handed me a copy. On the very first page, I noticed the ink uneven, smudged in parts. More importantly, the witness signature belonged to none other than Randall Pierce, Victoria's attorney. The second witness was a junior employee who had since quit. This violated the rule that witnesses must be independent, without conflicts of interest. My hands trembled as I clutched the copy, realizing I'd found a crack. Evidence, notary record copy, May 14, 2020, witness number 1 signed as Randall Pierce, ink visibly inconsistent compared to other files from the same day. The following afternoon, Victoria summoned me to a sleek cafe downtown. She sat flanked by Sabrina and Randall, eyes cold as if she had already won. "Olivia," Victoria said firmly, "you can't fight us. The cabin already belongs to Blue Mesa. Sign the release, take the payout, and stay out of our way." I choked out. "The cabin was my father's gift to me. He never changed his mind." Sabrina smirked. "Do you think a court will listen to your sobbing? We have paperwork, notarization, an entire system backing us. You're just a small-town teacher. No one believes you." Randall shrugged. "Best accept it. Don't ruin yourself further." I walked out with eyes stinging, knowing they had tightened the noose while I was left outside their chessboard. That night, I laid the Blue Mesa file in front of David, praying he'd support me. His reaction broke me further. "I'm not denying something shady is going on," he said, placing the papers down. "But do you really think a judge will side with you? Victoria has money, Sabrina has law, Randall has influence. All you've got is some smudged ink." Tears welled. "I have the truth." He looked at me with a stranger's eyes. "Truth isn't enough without the power to prove it. I don't want our marriage torn apart by this fight. If you don't stop, I don't know if we can stay together." I went numb. The man I thought would shield me had turned away, or worse, stepped aside. It felt like the world itself collapsed, leaving me to face the shadows alone. While sorting the Blue Mesa file again, I stumbled on a small envelope tucked inside. Opening it nearly knocked me out of my chair. It was a printout of an internal email between Sabrina and Victoria. Evidence, internal email printout, October 12, 2021, 5:45 p.m. Sabrina to Victoria, "If we use the Alzheimer's records, we can invalidate any objection easily. Randall will handle the notary. Cabin will be done in 60 days. My blood boiled. They had exploited my father's Alzheimer's, turning it into a weapon to legitimize fraud. Pain surged with fury. This was no longer about property, but about desecrating his memory. That night, I sat alone in the dark, moonlight spilling across the floor. On the table lay the old, green satchel my father had given me, carved with the words, "For Olivia, to carry knowledge and courage." I rested my hand on it, tears falling, whispering, "Dad, what do I do?" His words echoed in my head, his constant reminder that a will is only valid if notarized correctly, with independent witnesses, and if the person signing is competent. And his power of attorney only triggered if 2 doctors certified incapacity. These were the safeguards he built. I lifted my head, heartbeat pounding. Those dry legal rules were my only path. They could become weapons. Victoria and Sabrina's greed had trapped them. They let Randall sign as witness, they leaned on false medical records. If I gathered enough evidence, if I stayed patient, I could flip the game. Moonlight gleamed on my father's leather journal. I opened the last page and saw his shaky words. "The cabin belongs to Olivia. No one may touch it." Through tears, I smiled faintly. "I understand, Dad, I'll fight. I'll turn this pain into strength." I closed the journal and took a deep breath. For the first time since the string of defeats, I felt fire spark within me, the fire of defiance. From here on, I would no longer just defend. I would begin my counterattack, a revenge carved from the very rules they thought they could bend. And in that still night, I vowed, this would not remain the story of a fragile teacher cornered by greed. This would be the beginning of a justice war. Each piece of evidence a sharpened blade, because this time, I was ready. I knew that to face Victoria, Sabrina, and Randall, I couldn't charge straight into battle. They had money, power, and skilled lawyers. I was just a teacher, alone, misunderstood by my own community. But I had something they didn't. My father's memory, the legal safeguards he left behind, and the resolve never to let the cabin become land for sale. I began sketching out a plan, step by step, just as my father used to say. If you want to build a strong house, you start with a solid foundation. The first step was gathering real pieces of the puzzle, not just an anonymous email, not just a smudged copy, but a chain of evidence that connected. I started with my father's journal, written consistently even through his weakest days. I photographed every page, marking the entries when he was still lucid, still affirming the cabin belonged to me. Then I sought out Ethan Brooks, my father's longtime friend and a veteran notary. I remembered he had certified many of my father's documents, including the original will. With trembling hands, I showed him the supplemental will. Ethan frowned immediately. "This isn't the standard format my office ever used," he said, flipping page after page. "And this signature? I can request handwriting analysis. Believe me, Olivia, your father didn't sign this in a competent state of mind." Relief washed over me. For the first time in weeks, someone was standing with me. I asked him to hold the copy and begin verification. Next, I went to Dr. Nora Ames, the neurologist who treated my father's Alzheimer's. She pulled out his medical file, pointing to the date of worsening diagnosis. On May 14, 2020, he was no longer competent to sign any legal document, she said firmly. I gripped her hand. "Please, testify when the time comes. This is the only way I can protect his promise." Her eyes softened. "He spoke of you often. I won't let his memory be abused." Finally, I visited Mrs. Klein, our longtime neighbor in Aspen Valley. She told me that on the very day Sabrina claimed my father signed the will, her doorbell camera captured the cabin. "Your father never stepped outside that entire day," she said, handing me the clip. It was the missing piece I needed to dismantle their timeline completely. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed allies, people who could stand beside me in court. I met with Jenna Morales, a probate attorney known for helping clients with little money in tough inheritance battles. Nervously, I laid out the evidence before her. "Jenna, I can't afford top-tier lawyers, but I have the truth. Do you believe in this case?" She scanned the papers, played the video, read the printed email. Then she looked up, eyes resolute. "I've seen many will disputes, but rarely one this brazen. I'll take your case, Olivia. Not for money, for justice." With Jenna, the plan aligned. Ethan would testify about the faulty notarization, Dr. Nora about my father's condition, Mrs. Klein with the video footage, and I had my father's journal. Piece by piece, the picture grew clear. Victoria and Sabrina had staged a false narrative, with Randall as their legal enabler. I knew waiting silently for trial would give them time to bury evidence. I needed to push them into the open, force them to slip. So I staged a family mediation, pretending to negotiate. In the cabin's living room, I sat across from Victoria and Sabrina, forcing my voice to sound fragile. Maybe I can't fight you. I just want a small part of the cabin, one room to remember my father. Victoria scoffed. You're naive, Olivia. The cabin will soon be a resort. Blue Mesa already paid the deposit. Sabrina cut in. Construction starts in 60 days. You have nothing left. Hidden in my coat pocket, my recorder captured it all. Their careless admission became the peace they never realized they had given me. But I also knew risks loomed. Victoria could buy off witnesses. Sabrina could use her connections to block signature analysis. Randall could spread rumors, destroying my credibility, even jeopardizing my teaching job. Worse still, David, my husband, was drifting further away. He feared the legal war, feared the truth I was chasing would consume our marriage. One night, he said, I can't take this pressure anymore. Olivia, if you keep going, I don't know if I can stay. I sat silent, tears rolling, but my resolve hardened. I couldn't let the cabin slip away, no matter the cost. By now I had a chain of evidence and key witnesses. But I also held something stronger, something secret, the ace I wasn't ready to reveal. I knew it would only cut deepest when they were convinced of victory, when retreat was impossible. Just as I organized everything, preparing for the next phase, the phone rang. Ethan's voice trembled on the other end. Olivia, I just received a disciplinary notice from the Notary Association. Someone accused me of tampering with records, claiming I colluded with you. If they suspend my license, I can't testify. I froze, gripping the phone. Victoria and Sabrina had struck first, aiming to shatter the very cornerstone of my plan. The fragile framework I had just built now threatened to collapse before it even began. In the darkness, one question echoed. Was my entire revenge plan, the one I had poured my soul into, already on the verge of falling apart from the very start? I had laid out the plan, step by step. Now it was time to put it into motion. Every move felt like stepping onto thin ice. One wrong step and everything would shatter. I remembered my father's advice when teaching me to build a fire in the cabin. First gather the dry wood, stack it carefully, then strike the spark. Rush it and the flame dies instantly. His words became my compass for this stage. I began by reinforcing the chain of evidence. At Mrs. Spot Klein's house in Aspen Valley, I requested the doorbell camera footage. The clip showed that on the day Sabrina claimed my father signed the will, the cabin remained still. No sign of him stepping outside. I printed keyframes, time-stamped them, and secured the original. Next, I met Dr. Nora again. She signed a medical affidavit, stating clearly my father's Alzheimer's had advanced by May 2020. He could not understand or execute any legal decision at that time. She wrote, her pen steady. Evidence, medical report, May 15, 2020. Dr. Nora Ames confirming Thomas Carter lacked legal capacity to sign any document. The final piece came from Ethan. Despite facing an inquiry by the Notary Association, he refused to back down. He provided me with copies of authentic notarized journals from earlier years, showing the official format and ink seals, proof the supplemental will was forged. Evidence alone wasn't enough. I had to unite the witnesses into a shield. Jenna Morales, my attorney, organized a small meeting at her office. Ethan sat across from Dr. Nora, while Mrs. Klein brought the USB drive with video. Jenna spread the files across the desk, speaking with clarity. We must build an unbroken chain. Medical proof of incapacity, notary proof of irregularity, video proof of absence, and journal proof of intent. In court, they can't knock it all down. My heart pounded as I listened. For the first time, I felt I wasn't alone. Jenna urged me to create one more strike, something that would bait them into exposing themselves. I took a gamble. I drafted a concession letter, pretending I'd settle if I could keep a few mementos from the cabin. Within a day, Victoria replied, brimming with smugness. The deal is done, Olivia. Even if you went to court, we have enough paperwork to crush you. Blue Mesa is ready for contract signing. That confession became my second recording. Proof they had already sold the cabin before the dispute ended. Evidence, voice recording, February 22, 2022, Victoria Hale admitting she prepared to sell the cabin to Blue Mesa before the inheritance was settled. The day of the Pitkin County Probate Court hearing approached. Jenna and I filed for a temporary injunction to block the transfer. At the preliminary session, we presented the chain of evidence. On the other side, Victoria, Sabrina, and Randall fought back aggressively, submitting more documents to validate the supplemental will. I trembled as I took the witness stand, hands ice cold. Jenna gave me a small nod, reminding me to breathe. I declared, "My father always said the cabin was mine. His journal and the original will confirm it. This supplemental will is fake." Randall snapped, "Objection. Miss Carter is not an expert. This is speculation." Jenna immediately called Dr. Nora. She held up her medical report, voice unwavering. On the date listed in that will, Thomas Carter no longer had the capacity to make any legal decision. The courtroom fell silent. But I knew. The fight wasn't over. When Ethan was called, murmurs swept the room. Opposing counsel held up the Notary Association's disciplinary notice, accusing him of deliberately misrepresenting records. Randall sneered, "His testimony isn't credible. He's under investigation. Who can trust him?" I froze. The chain of witnesses, the heart of my plan, was breaking. Sweat glistened on Ethan's forehead as he stammered, "I can prove I have original copies." But the judge cut him off, noting his credibility was compromised. At that moment, I thought it was over. Sabrina smirked, whispering to Victoria, "They thought they had won." Clutching my father's green satchel, I drew strength from the carved words. I rose, requesting to speak. "Your Honor, I am just a teacher, not a lawyer. But I have a recording that must be heard right now. It proves their true intent beyond the notarization debate." I played the recording from the family mediation. Victoria's voice rang out clearly. "The cabin will soon be a resort. Blue Mesa already paid the deposit." The courtroom erupted. The judge's brow furrowed as he turned to Randall. "This matter is under probate review. How is there already a sales contract?" Randall stammered. Sabrina's face drained of color. Jenna pounced. "This is an unlawful transfer attempt during an unresolved dispute. Your Honor, this alone warrants an emergency injunction." For a moment, it felt like we had regained control. But suddenly, the opposing attorney lifted a new file. Randall declared, "We have another witness, someone who will confirm Thomas Carter intended to leave the cabin to Sabrina." I turned toward the doors, and my blood froze. A familiar figure walked in. It was David, my husband. I didn't know what he would say, but his presence cut like a blade to my back. Everything I had built could collapse with a single testimony. And I realized, it all now depended on one last move. The final card I had not yet dared to play. The probate courtroom in Pitkin County was packed. Not only relatives and neighbors filled the benches, but even a few local reporters had shown up. The Carter inheritance dispute had spilled into the public eye. I sat at the plaintiff's table, heart pounding. Across from me, Victoria wore an elaborate fur coat, her face frozen like stone. Beside her, Sabrina adjusted a thick stack of files, and Randall managed a thin, smug smile. The judge struck the gavel. The trial was officially underway. My attorney, Jenna Morales, rose, her voice crisp. "Your Honor, we will prove the so-called supplemental will is fraudulent, and that Thomas Carter never changed his intent. He always intended the Aspen Valley cabin to pass to his only daughter, Olivia Carter." Victoria's lips curled as if she'd just heard a joke, but I knew each piece of evidence would strip their masks away. Jenna began. Exhibit 1. She held up the printed email I'd received on the day of the memorial. Evidence, email forward, November 3rd, 2021, 2:27 p.m. Sabrina to Victoria. Use the signature sample from the 2019 refinance file. Make sure Olivia never finds out. Gasps rippled through the room. Sabrina stiffened, her face flushed red. She stammered, that could be fake." But Jenna cut in smoothly. "This email has been authenticated by server metadata, verified by an internal IT staffer. Its authenticity is indisputable." Next, Ethan stepped to the stand. Though under pressure from the Notary Association, his voice was steady. I compared the supplemental will to legitimate notarizations. The ink stamps, the formatting, and the witnesses are all improper. Most telling, one of the witnesses was Randall Pierce, counsel for Victoria. That alone violates Colorado state law. Then came Dr. Nora. She opened my father's medical file. On May 14, 2020, Mr. Carter was clinically diagnosed with severe cognitive impairment. He was incapable of understanding or signing any legal document. This is the official hospital record. Evidence. Medical report, May 15, 2020. Dr. Nora Ames confirming Thomas Carter lacked legal capacity. The judge nodded, jotting notes carefully. Randall began to sweat. Victoria's brow furrowed. Mrs. Klein, our neighbor, stepped forward with a USB drive. The video played on the big screen. The cabin, quiet and untouched, on the very day the will was supposedly signed. No one went in or out. My father never appeared. Then Jenna played the secret family mediation recording. Victoria's voice boomed across the courtroom. The cabin will soon be a resort. Blue Mesa already paid the deposit. Gasps rose again. The judge turned sharply to Randall. Is this accurate? Did Mrs. Hale sell the cabin while probate was pending? Randall faltered. Sabrina gripped her chair, face pale with panic. Jenna pressed harder, producing the printed internal email between mother and daughter. Evidence, internal email. October 12, 2021, 5:45 p.m., Sabrina to Victoria. If we use the Alzheimer's records, we can nullify any objection. Randall will handle the notarization. The cabin will be secured in 60 days. Sabrina's complexion drained to white. She whispered, "That was just hypothetical, not." But her voice was drowned by whispers sweeping the room. Randall scrambled, rising to call his surprise witness. My chest clenched as David, my own husband, walked in. For a moment I thought I'd collapse, but Jenna signaled me to stay calm. She turned, her voice sharp and clear. Your Honor, before this so-called witness testifies, we present our final, decisive exhibit. The original notarization log of Pitkin County, time-stamped and tamper-proof. At the very hour Randall claims he notarized the supplemental will, the log shows he was certifying an entirely different transaction in Aspen. He could not have been in two places at once. Evidence, Notary Log Original, May 14, 2020, 10:22 a.m. Randall Pierce recorded notarizing another file in Aspen, directly contradicting his testimony. The whispers swelled into a roar. Randall turned ashen, sweat dripping down his temple, lips trembling. Victoria clawed at her handbag. Sabrina slumped into her seat, eyes vacant. The judge slammed the gavel. This court finds the supplemental will of May 14, 2020 invalid due to fraud and improper notarization. The Aspen Valley cabin is hereby recognized as the lawful inheritance of Olivia Carter, pursuant to the original will. He paused, then fixed his gaze on the defendants. Furthermore, based on the emails and recordings, this court refers the matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of asset fraud and elder exploitation. The blow struck like lightning. Victoria's mouth fell open as she tried to object, her voice breaking. Sabrina dropped her head, tears spilling. Randall stood frozen, a hollow statue. On the spot, the judge signed an injunction. The cabin was frozen from all transactions, the Blue Mesa contract voided. Victoria and Sabrina were issued restraining orders, barred from approaching me within 200 meters. Sabrina was suspended from practicing law immediately. Randall now faced a bar investigation. I sat there, each word flooding through me like spring air sweeping away winter's ice. After weeks of humiliation, isolation, and dismissal, the truth thundered aloud in a court of law. I turned to the small framed photo of my father I had carried. For a heartbeat, I could almost hear his voice. You did it, Olivia. You kept the cabin. Victoria snapped, shouting in desperation. Olivia, you'll pay for disgracing this family. But the bailiff stood behind her already, closing in. No one believed in her noble mother mask anymore. Sabrina bowed her head, sobbing, whispering, I only wanted to be acknowledged. But the words came too late. I inhaled deeply, lifted my chin high. Justice had been served. And I knew, from this moment on, my life was turning to a new page, a page my father would be proud of, a page where betrayal had met its reckoning under the light of truth. News of the Carter case swept across Colorado like a storm. Local papers splashed it on the front page. Television channels aired footage of Victoria leaving the courthouse, her face twisted with rage. In the years that followed, consequences rolled in like relentless waves, tearing apart her life. Victoria was convicted of asset fraud, sentenced to 3 years of probation along with heavy fines. The elite clubs that once welcomed her turned their backs, labeling her a swindler. Friends abandoned her, her reputation in ruins. Sabrina's fall was even harder. Stripped of her law license, she lost her job at the prestigious firm. The The project she had once dreamed of now slammed shut. To her peers, she became the textbook example of a disgraced attorney. Though still young, her career was finished. Randall Pierce couldn't escape either. The state bar suspended him, and his file was handed over to investigators. His name became a stain in Colorado's legal circles. As for me, Olivia Carter, I finally kept the Aspen Valley cabin, not just by paper, but through truth itself. I returned to the wooden home in the forest, cleaning it, opening the windows to let the light pour in. Every summer, I brought students here, telling them about my father and teaching them how to listen to the forest as you would listen to a friend. The cabin was no longer just property. It became a sanctuary, a place where memory turned into strength. The most unexpected turn came from David. After the trial, he came to me, his eyes full of regret. "I was wrong not to believe you," he admitted, voice breaking. I stayed silent for a long time before answering. Trust is hard to rebuild, but not impossible. Love might not return, but I chose to leave the door open for him to prove himself. That was the human grace I kept. A reminder that people can stumble, but they can also learn to mend. The cabin still stands, and so do I, finally, unbroken. In a family, love and trust must be proven through real actions. Otherwise, the law and the truth will be the final shield that protects you. Olivia Carter's story shows us clearly that no one has the right to trample on memories, steal hard-earned legacies, or twist inheritances for greed. Justice may arrive late, but once the light shines on it, every lie will be exposed, and every betrayer will pay the price. But what about you? If one day your inheritance or legal rights were exploited by those closest to you, would you stay silent and accept it, or would you stand up and fight to reclaim fairness? Do you believe that in the darkest moments, when everything seems lost, it is your determination and careful preparation that become the keys to turning the tables? Share your thoughts in the comments. We truly want to hear your answers. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to the True Revenge Stories channel so you can hear more gripping tales of justice every single day. You can also explore our Revenge Stories playlist, filled with powerful stories of family, love, betrayal, and redemption waiting for you to discover. Let's spread the lessons learned from these unforgettable revenge stories, because tomorrow you might be the very person who needs to hear this.